Hi, everyone. Welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Andrea Pearson, and I'm joined today with our two co-hosts.
Lindsay Baroker.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
It's been a crazy day. The whole world's falling apart in my house right now. But today we're actually interviewing Michaelbrent Collings. Michaelbrent, sorry. You can go ahead. I know.
I'm out.
That's great. It's great when your friends get your name wrong.
Right. Oh, hey, I did like a CD when I was in high school when I was going to be famous in a band. Me and my best friend, and he spelled my name wrong every time in the liner notes. I was so pissed.
And you've since adjusted because
Yeah, it's fine.
Anyway, Michaelbrent Collings. He is one of the most versatile writers around. He is an internationally best-selling novelist, produced screenwriter, and multiple Bram Stoker Award finalist. While he is best known for horror and is one of the most successful indie horror authors in the United States, he has also written best-selling thriller, fantasy, science fiction, mystery, humor, young adult, middle grade, and Western romance, which is pretty awesome. I'm not done reading his bio, though. As a novelist, Michaelbrent has written dozens of bestsellers that have also received critical acclaim, and he and his work have been featured on everything from mom and pop podcasts, which is not what this is. We're not a mom and pop podcast, to Publishers Weekly, the San Francisco Book Review, and NPR. And I don't know what NPR is.
It's National Public Radio, baby.
Oh, okay.
That's the PBS of radio.
It's true. NPR. Yes, now that you say it, I recognize it. But radio is like the 30s, okay?
I know. I was in a zoot suit at the time, so it was fine.
Yes. Anyway, Michaelbrent and I have been friends for a long time. We used to do panels back when I used to do LTUE. I was like, Michaelbrent, I'm not doing LTUE anymore. You should stop doing them too. And he's like, nah, I like it. But we were on horror panels together quite frequently back in the day, and those were good days. And yeah, Michaelbrent's always impressed me with his humility while being successful. So we're gonna annoy him about stuff today. But yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. Michaelbrent. I just want it said properly once through the show, and now it's fine.
Did I not say it properly at least once?
Sure. But, we've only been friends 7 years. You're forgiven like a bobble or two here or there.
Michaelbrent. I always say Michaelbrent. Do you
Yeah.
really separate it out?
Yeah. Well, my wife, actually, when we first met, she had me in the B section of her phone book for Brent. And then I have a best friend, and we'd been best friends for months. And I'd call and I'd go, hey, it's Michaelbrent. And after like 6-8 months, he finally said, dude, you can stop telling me your last name. I know it's you. So this is not an abnormal event for me. And it's not that I have a gold stick up my butt. It's just that there's like 800 Michaels in my family. And this way I know who's yelling at me at family events and stuff. So.
And it is the way your parents named you. I mean, Michaelbrent. So
yeah, because they hated me, obviously.
Yes, apparently. Anyway, yeah, we're looking forward to interviewing you today. We're just going to go right into questions, if that's okay with everybody.
Awesome.
Okay, so and I'm starting, lucky me, what has your writer journey looked like, and how did you get started as an indie author?
My writer journey has been largely failing to do anything else properly. My dad was a creative writing director at a major university, so we grew up with writing as kind of part and parcel of our home life. But I didn't want to be like 40 years old, living in my mom's basement, being like, any day, to women that I bring home, I'm going to make it big, like a really sad rock star, only even worse because I'm just a writer. So I was a lawyer for close to a decade, and I tried to get published, my first book, traditional published, because I didn't know anything else. And it went nowhere. I have 2 4-inch binders with single page rejections. So people go like, how much rejection is it before you get sold? Well, it's until you succeed, and it didn't go anywhere. And so one of my friends said, put it on this Kindle thing. And I did that, and I don't know what happened. 6 months later, that book was the #1 best-selling science fiction and horror title on Amazon. And so it kind of went from there. I am very open about the fact that there's good years and bad years. So a couple years ago, it was a really bad year. And I actually, I credit you, Andrea, constantly. Like my whole family knows who you are, because a couple years ago, I really went to this really low place, and I had actually decided I'm going to have to do something else. And just so everyone knows, like, I'm always amused that if there's a doctor and he goes, I'm not going to be a doctor anymore, I'm going to live my bliss as a janitor, and everyone's like, oh, that's so brave of you, that's awesome, and that's such a good business decision, you're going to be happier. But if you're a writer and you're miserable and life is terrible and you're like, I think I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer, and for some reason there's this like, well, you failed at life, you know, like you can't make the same business decision the other way. But I was really there. And one thing is, if you are a semi-successful writer, you become functionally unemployable at anything else, because people look at your resume and they're just like, well, that's weird. And so I was like delivering pizza and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I went on my Facebook page and said, I got to be done with this, guys. And Andrea and one other person named Joanna Penn, who's a very successful author, were on within like 5 minutes. Both of them basically texted me and saying, that's not okay. Here are things you have to do to be better. And I took both their advice. There was a lot of advice about covers and marketing. And then I spent a lot more time studying myself, because I realized I hadn't really treated myself like a business properly. And so I credit Andrea 100% for real with still having a career and having had just come off the best year I've ever had. So there's a lot of ups and downs in the business, and I just couldn't do anything else right. So I just keep reverting to this weird situation.
And it fits your personality. Anybody who knows Michaelbrent knows that he's a writer. This is what he does.
Yeah, they're like, he is clearly incompetent at life. So it's either like writer or congressperson. So, and I don't have the facial hair for congressperson, so I'm really out of luck.
Yes. Okay, so your dad is also a well-known author. How did that influence your desire to become one yourself?
Again, it was like, you know, it was just at the house. Like, we had a typewriter. I can remember my dad coming home with, he was this English professor, and he got to bring home a computer. And this was, you know, a while ago. And he walks in with a Commodore 64, and he shows us the old discs, which are like, I don't know, they're the size of hubcaps, only square. And he like waves it and he goes, this has got 64K of memory. That's almost enough for a whole chapter. And we were just like, what? You know, and so we were in there with our own discs. And there was like no autosave feature. So I can remember losing entire discs worth of stuff because I popped it out without saving. And we just grew up with it. And so I always kind of did it on the side. And then my wife, she got totally shafted because she married this like stable lawyer who kind of liked writing. And then 2 years in, she goes, oh, so it's a real thing? Because I thought it was like collecting bottle caps or something. And so it's a part of my DNA. And it's nice because I have a home base. That is, like, a lot of people have to start this process. And it's easier if you can start, you know, if you can start a mile-long race at the quarter-mile point. That's a huge advantage, you know, and that's kind of what my dad gave me. It wasn't a whole lot in the way of business and publishing, because he's largely an academic. But it was just like, I knew what a story was. I knew how to formulate a story by the time I was 10. And I wasn't great at it, but I could do it. And so that was just tremendously helpful.
I can totally sympathize with the being unemployable thing. As someone who's been self-employed since like 2003, I don't even know what I would put on a resume. I'd be like BSing my way completely through the entire thing. And
I know, right? And that's part of why I have an imprint, and it's just me, but it's written Insomnia Press. So I suppose if, you know, worst comes to worst, I can be like, owner, written Insomnia Press, and they'll ask about it. I'll be like, it was a publishing endeavor. You know, I'll just leave me out of it.
they published one author.
Yeah,
it might have been me.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was hilarious because like I was doing pizza, and I used to read about the authors, and they were all like, Tim Powers, I remember, I think it was Tim Powers, has been a stenographer, a pirate, like 800 different things. And as a kid, I thought, wow, he's really lived, man. And now I know, I'm like, oh, he needed money for Christmas. And that was probably taxes came due. And he was like, oh crap, I didn't pay him this year. And so it's part and parcel. You do have to kind of be flexible with your life and be willing to do what matters most to you, which for me is taking care of my family. But I remember going into the pizza place, and the guy, usually it was a supervisor, I found out, but they called the main manager guy, And he comes over and he goes, so I have to ask you about your resume. First of all, I saw it and thought it was just BS the whole time, because it's got like written 40 books and these are the, and he goes, but my next question is, why are you here? And it totally blew his mind, and it was hilarious. So luckily they gave me the job I needed, and that got me over that hump. And I'm forever, I dedicated my last book to those guys because they helped me out.
That's awesome. So you've been publishing for a while, it sounds like, and it may have been a little easier when you got in, like for many of us. Didn't have to have the best covers early on.
Yeah. Oh, Wild West.
What are some of the changes you've seen over the years? And it sounded like you might have redone your covers. What are some of the things you've done to adapt to the changes?
Well, first of all, it was, you look at some of these people who have a huge amount of success online, and some of them are really good and deserve it. And there's a couple that they were like the first tier of a multi-level marketing platform. They got on Kindle when it was them and 2 other people. And so they sold a third of the books on Kindle. And so if I was 100th person on there, I still had a good percentage. And now, of course, people calculate it's like 10 million books on Amazon. And I would say that's a conservative guess. Just knowing the amount of people, the number of people who are constantly uploading and stuff. So it's much more about visibility and being seen. And the changes I've made are just to kind of professionalism. The writing hasn't changed. Hopefully it gets better every time, but I put a lot more time into covers. And when Andrea, that was one of the things she said, she was like, Michaelbrent, your covers suck. And she said it like that. And you have to kind of be willing to.
I did not say suck.
You totally did. But you know what? But here's the thing is, if you're an author, you have to have people in your corner who are willing to say that, and that you go, oh, but I know Andrea is like my friend, and she wasn't being a jerk. She was saying, let's get to the point and get you up and running again. And I was appreciative. Part of me is like, I'm that, and I kind of wanted to cry a little, but then you step back and you go, okay, but they do kind of suck. And my wife's the same way. She doesn't hide it. If I'm reading something to her and she's like, and she's fallen asleep, she doesn't make any attempt not to fall asleep. And I go, I should probably retool that page. So you need that. So the covers, I didn't just go, oh, well, I'll make new covers. And Andrea was along with me on the journey because I'd send her stuff, and she's got a really good eye for that, and her husband does. And I spent 2 months just in my bedroom learning professional level Photoshop. I didn't just go, oh, now I'm going to put new, text or typography on it. I did every single cover almost has been updated. So that was a big thing. And also, I spend thousands of dollars every month now on advertising. My website's been completely overhauled. So it used to be a writer website and there was lots of words on it. Now you go and there's 4 images and it just takes you to different lists of the genres I do. So it's just being aware of market trends and of the things that people are looking for now, because it's not a day where you can put up, a cover that you made in Microsoft Paint and get away with it. And that's a good thing, because indies have done so well that we're now expected to be as good as the professionals, and actually better, because if it's me right here and Stephen King right next to me, I have to look better than his books on Amazon as a thumbnail, because otherwise, why would somebody take a chance on Michaelbrent?
Yeah, it's like, that's the thing that's so hilarious, is that you have this big chunk of your life where you're doing it, you're an author, and then that is seen as a gap in your resume. It was like, I was running a small business. Look at all of these skills that I've gained.
Totally. Yeah. You have to. And if you're an indie, you guys know it's, people go, oh, it's nice being your own boss. And that's baloney, because what I tell people is I have tens of thousands of bosses and I have to respond to the aggregate things that they want me to do. And that's fine. I enjoy it. But like on my Facebook page, on my fan page, just because of the COVID stuff. Oh, and by the way, I usually look better than this. It's all COVID. Because of that stuff, I kind of put a social isolation day 1, and I was joking about it, and just kind of making fun of the people who have hoarded all the toilet paper. And so I said, I took a picture of stir fry and said, we're almost out of baby corn, please airlift us some, and just being silly. And my fans were like emailing going, that was the funniest thing ever, is this a thing? So now I'm on day 40 something of my isolation journal, just kind of chronicling my devolution into madness. And that wasn't because I was like, I think I'll do this. It was because the fans liked it, and part of my job is to please them, and I am having fun with it. I don't mean to say it's like a burden. I don't want to be one of these professional ball players who makes $20 million a minute and is like, it's so hard. Because I'm very privileged to have this. But a lot of what I do, I don't have to sit and think, what does Michaelbrent want? I sit and think, what do all these people want? And I have to respond to that.
Yeah, the inmates run my asylum as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so a while ago at the Oregon Coast Business Masterclass where I met Andrea, one of the panels, the dean asked the audience, which they're all authors, how many people have been publishing for more than a decade, and a bunch of hands went up. I was like, how many of you have had a multi-year patch where you thought you weren't going to be able to continue publishing, and all of the same hands stayed up?
Oh, totally.
So obviously dry spots are things that happen to everyone. And do you have any sort of insight into how do you identify if it's a downturn that's just happening versus a thing that you need to scramble to fix? Like, what's the hunker versus scramble indicator?
Yeah. I mean, there are some indicators. As far as it is stressful because Amazon gives you these hourly reports. And one of the things that'll be helpful is not looking at them. And it's so hard when you're a new author and you've got one book, and it's a big deal because last hour I sold one and this hour I sold another one. So I doubled my sales for the day. And that's a nice feeling, and you get up into where you're selling hundreds or thousands of books in a day, and one or two isn't as big of a difference. So now they give you a little pie chart for Amazon, and I want to say Kobo does, and I think Draft to Digital. So a lot of these e-retailers and aggregators, they give you this chart. And so I look at the chart for the last week, and if I see kind of this happening, I take a look at what's going on, and maybe I can tweak some advertising, or maybe I go, oh, well, there was a big sale on Wednesday, so of course it's going to do that. But I worry a lot less about individual days. And that's one of the tips is don't freak out if your sales go from 500 to 0, serious problem. But that's also an indicator that there's probably an IT issue. And that happened once. It was like Apple just didn't send any sales updates for several weeks. And so you can monitor it that way. So you're looking at rates of decline or increase over time. And you also have to be really kind of data driven, which sucks for most authors. I mean, that's really hard, but I have hundreds of Excel spreadsheets with each of my ads. I mean, I'm running hundreds of ads at any one time, and you can't just sort of go, well, I'll put $10 here and we'll see what happens. You have to really be monitoring that stuff. But really, it's an overtime sort of thing. And if it's a steady decline, it's about your priorities. So if for me, here I'm holding my caffeinated drink, I'm going to put it down because I'm a writer. It's either that or booze. So if your line for me is like, I'm going to take care of my family, and as soon as I dip below this, it doesn't matter what all the little quirks are, I'm going to find something else to do to bring that overall level up. If your only priority is to be publishing and you're happy in a cardboard box in an alley, and I'm not saying that as a joke, then your only litmus is, am I putting books out? But you also have to be aware of what you're trying to do. And the second that what you're doing doesn't feed into that, you have to make an adjustment.
All right. And we were talking earlier about how things were easier earlier on when there was less competition. In your opinion, have things changed for the better in any ways? Or are there things that are better now than there were when you got in?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, if nothing else, like when I sold all those books in the beginning, the worst thing wasn't that it was just kind of Wild West. It was that I had no idea what I'd done, so I couldn't repeat it. But even so, I knew that I had sold more copies of this book some weeks than New York Times bestsellers did, because I had friends in that boat who were New York Times bestsellers, and I told a couple of them, and they're like, wow, that should have gotten you on the list. But as soon as I said indie, there was this immediate, oh, so you suck is what you're telling me. And you're not good enough to actually be published is what you're telling me. And there's still that stigma to some extent. And I found it's more and more pervasive for obvious reasons. The more you talk to people who are in the publishing industry, because they have, their perspective. And for just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with traditional publishing. they both have different pluses and minuses. And so, but there's still a little bit of a stigma. But one of the great things is I can say now, I am a #1 bestseller in these categories in Amazon, or I have spent 3 years as one of their most popular horror writers. And people have that in their consciousness enough, they go, oh, it doesn't have the immediate recognition of New York Times bestseller. But if I say last week I sold 5,000 books, then people are going to go, okay, well, that sounds like you're actually doing something with your life. And so there's the ability to create respect, even if people aren't right there with it at the beginning. And that's fantastic. And also, I love meeting all of the other professionals, Andrea, you guys, there's so many people that I've interacted with over the years who are indies, and you just see the level and the quality rising as people get into it, because they have to be so competent in so many areas. And I love to be surrounded by expertise. I love being the dumbest person in the room. It's such a cool feeling. And that happens more and more. I'm like, wow, that person really knows this. Oh my gosh, she's so good at that. And that's just fun for me.
And a good thing is, like I've been noticing that people, the regular normal people, what do we call them? Muggles. They
lucky.
Yes. The insanity. Yes. They don't, a lot of them are starting, like when we moved to where we are now, I told one of my neighbors, I was like, yeah, I'm an indie author. No, I'm an author. And she's like, oh, do you do it yourself or do you have a publisher? And I was like, I do it myself. She goes, good for you. And she does not know any authors, and she's, she's not in the world. And so like the regular readers are recognizing that, that indie is not horrible, because they're actually reading us too. So
yeah, I went to, my mom was hospitalized a couple months ago, and it was really funny because I went to the hospital.
She was hospitalized. It was really funny.
Oh, well, that part's always funny, but there was other funny stuff. No, look, I don't like my mom. No, my mom comes to so many cons with me, and everybody likes her. When she doesn't come, it's like people come up and I go, would you like a book signed? And they're like, where's your mom? I mean, she's so much nicer than me. But she went to the hospital, and it was really serious. Like, she had to be intubated, and there was all this stuff happening. And there was this one lovely nurse who really took care of us the first night. And then she left her shift, and she went over to my mom and she said, it was a pleasure helping you, which is no surprise because mom's really nice. And then she comes over and she gave me this long, kind of borderline creepy handshake. And she looked at me and said, and it was really nice meeting you. And I'm like, look, that's...
He's pointing at his face for anybody listening.
I look like an author. I mean, like, the only way to improve my appearance is with a paper bag. I'm not a model. And so I was like, what just happened? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then I went out to the parking lot, and one of the other nurses came out, and she's like, I can't remember her name. We'll call her Jane. She goes, were you okay? And I went, with what? She goes, Jane was fangirling over you so hard. And she was a reader. She was just this regular person who recognized me when I walked through the door. And that happens more and more. And then actually it's the only time I've ever played the fame card. One of the other nurses came in and she's like, so are you famous? And I thought, maybe my mom will get better help. So I went, absolutely. I am so famous, like Kardashian level, watch my mom, or hordes of people will show up to stone your house and stuff. But there was no, oh, you're only famous on Amazon. It was like the whole nursing staff was coming by and just kind of talking to me about it. And there was not a hint of, but you really kind of suck. You're famous in a sucky way. Again, like a Kardashian.
Just like a Kardashian. Oh, boy.
Just kidding, Kim. I love you.
Yes. Okay, so the first year I met you, I met another author who shall remain nameless, but who has had movie deals and is big, and he snubbed me and you did not. And you guys were about the same level of success at that time. And he was just really awful.
Is the first letter J?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just clarifying.
Yes. You know who he is.
Continue.
Anyway. What's that? What'd you say?
Continue.
Anyway, so one of the things that's always impressed me about you is your ability to maintain humility and approachability despite really awesome success. I mean, I was like a brand new author when I was on those panels with you, and you were a normal person and you treated me like an equal, you know, and your dad was the same way, which I was like, holy cow, this guy, your dad, I idolize him just a little bit.
He's awesome.
But like how important do you feel an approach like that is to success, and how have you maintained it?
Well, it kind of depends. It's less important in traditional publishing, I think, because you have to be appealing for the cameras and when you're doing interviews and stuff. And as an indie, I think people expect you to interact with them more personally, which is fine. But like I spend 3 or sometimes 4 hours a day answering fan mail at this point. And everybody who emails me or comments on my Facebook page I respond. And I try not to just say, thanks, buy my book. Like I respond, and I have relationships with people. I have this dear older lady who wrote me. I put all my books on sale because so many people are stuck inside, and so they're all 99 cents right now. And she wrote and said, I bought as many as I could because I'm old and I have pre-existing conditions and COVID's everywhere around here, so I'm going to die, but I'll die curled up with your books and a whiskey. And so I wrote her back this long letter. I said, that's not okay. My kids, I read it to them. They're not okay with this. So I will make you a deal. If you make it to June, I'll send you an autographed book. So hang in there. And she was like, awesome. And she writes once a week now just to give me a death update kind of thing. And let me know that she's still around and she wants her book. And so I don't see, James Patterson interacting at that level, and he can't. He's got hundreds of millions of people who've read his books, and he can't answer them all. I have tens of thousands, and if I get a couple of hundred comments or emails a day, I answer them all. And I think the fans really have respected that. And more, I'll go back to what you did for me, Andrea. I like to think that part of it was like, you're a good writer and you make the writing world better with your craft. But I know for a fact, a lot of it was just, I try and be nice to people. And the secret to success is having people who won't let you fail because they love you. And so I think it's tremendously important for longevity to have people out there like, here's what we'll do to support you when you're having a down day or a down month or a down year. And like you, again, you weren't just like, your covers suck. You spent time. I'd email you and go, how about this? It's not quite there. And I had other people doing that. Again, Joanna Penn was huge, and is just wonderful. Read her books, another great author. So you do have to have that personableness. And as far as how I maintain it, every time someone comes up to me at a convention or something and says, I read one of your books, I immediately lean back because there's a part of me that's like, they're going to try and punch me now. They're going to be so mad that I wasted so much of their time. And I think writers are all this kind of weird mix of narcissism and cripplingly low self-esteem, because we're all like, we're going to change the world with our words and people will pay. I'm J.K. Rowling, only better money-wise. And then someone's like, I want to publish you. And so many new writers go, what can I give you to publish me? And so whenever somebody's talking to me, I really do feel just like that dorky person who can't understand why they're talking to me. And I'm a dad, and I try and be a good dad. And part of being a good dad is being last in line. And that makes it really easy to go to a convention and someone goes, can I talk to you? And I'm like, of course, I'm a dad. What can I do for you? And I think having that kind of grounding in family and friends and loved ones really goes a long way toward being nice to people.
I think it helps a little bit that we're not quite as recognizable as authors too. So
Oh,
I don't know, maybe if somebody's
totally.
telling you you're beautiful and awesome every day, it might start to go to your head a little more. I don't know.
Can I tell you something? So like, I've actually started getting emails like that and comments on my Facebook page like, you're sexy, which again,
For the
He's
listener,
pointing at his face.
look,
sexy
no one is,
here.
I've never walked into a room and had someone just vomit spontaneously. Okay. But I've never turned any heads, and that's fine. My wife is in love with me, even though I'm bald. And so I know I'm secure with that. But having someone post on my wall, oh, you look really hot in that picture that you posted, there is nothing in me that's like, maybe I am that good looking. 100%. I just want to email them and say, you need to get your prescription fixed. And that will never go away.
All right, on that note, we want to transition a little bit and ask some marketing questions. I noticed in your catalog, it looks like you've got some books that are exclusive with Amazon and then some others that are wide. Could you talk a little bit about your strategy and why you're kind of split like that?
There's a couple reasons for the split. The first one is I am just really not an all eggs in one basket kind of person. And it does scare me that if Amazon decided to go tomorrow, all right, the new rate for authors is 20%. The authors would stay with Amazon because they are the biggest game in town, and most of them would be out of business the day after tomorrow. And so I'd like to have a little bit of security. I have an enormous mailing list, and part of that is so that I can say, hey, if Amazon dumps me, I can direct sell and still do okay. But part of it's just, I don't like the idea of a monopoly. I'm shocked that the Justice Department has not looked into things like Amazon and Facebook, because they are monopolies. And that's not to badmouth anybody. I hope Jeff Bezos doesn't get mad at me. But that is really scary, that the biggest game in town, who is 90% of the ebook market, in the US, could just say, no, we're not doing ebooks, and it's over. And so that's part of it. Part of it too is I have readers who don't like Amazon, and I want to be able to help them and provide for them. And so I kind of cycle it. So when a book is doing really well, it'll stay in Kindle Unlimited, it'll stay with Amazon. Or if Amazon's contacted me and said, leave this book in because we want to do a Kindle Spotlight or whatever in March, but it needs to be in Kindle Unlimited. So I'll keep it there. But as soon as it starts kind of tanking, I'll just put it onto the other ones, and I'll leave it wide for a while. And then one of the benefits is that when it comes back around to Kindle Unlimited again, I can email my mailing list and go, hey, it's free for all you Kindle Unlimited people, and it kind of builds it up. So a lot of this is just kind of strategically positioning yourself so that you can take advantage of upswings, and when downswings happen, it's not that you can stop every downswing, it's that you have to position so you can have another upswing in 6 months.
Yeah, I'm wide with most of my stuff also, but it's like I do the last couple series. I launch them into Kindle Unlimited and take advantage of that. It's interesting that you go out and then go back in. I think a lot of people struggle to gain momentum a second time, but it sounds like if you have such a big list, you probably have people that are KU subscribers and just waiting for that opportunity to get them.
Yeah, and it's helpful. And the list is like anything else. You build it. So like a year ago, I had 1,200 people on my list, and that's where it had been for years and years. And now I'm closing in on 20,000. And it's like anything else. I looked at it and said, I don't want to be beholden forever to Amazon, just in case they decide not to like me for some reason. And again, I try and be nice, so hopefully they won't dislike me, but should it happen, or should they close their doors, I've got this fallback. But it was just one more part of the marketing experience, and it was a lot of work. So everything that happens, you say you're positioned with this mailing list, and that's because I decided I needed a mailing list, and I spent lots of time on it. Last night, I couldn't sleep, so at 1 o'clock I went out and opened up my computer and spent 2.5 hours doing mailing list stuff, because that's the job.
I think people may be curious how you went from 1,200 to 20,000. Did you do like some bonus stuff, or just start promoting it more on your website?
Yeah, they're all Chinese bots. That's the secret.
Those are the best fans.
Yeah, right.
They don't
it's all Russian. Yeah, me, our good books loving, can offer Ray-Ban sunglasses $2.99. No, a lot of it was, well, there's a couple things. First of all, I used Facebook ads. Those are a tremendous way to get your email list up. And if you get a good ad going, mine is really clear. It goes, want a free book? And Facebook's good because you can market directly to sections of people. And over time, you start winnowing down your list. And I'm like, I know if these people like this and this and this, they're going to be interested in my ad. And it gets your costs really low. And the lower your cost is per ad, the more Facebook actually serves it. That means it's a really well-performing ad. so that's part of it. Part of it is my mailing list. I provide benefit. Every week I send out a list of books that I found through BookFunnel or through other free and bargain mailing lists, and I try and keep them. I don't advertise my own stuff except as an ancillary thing. So my book, my list is called Michaelbrent's Minions. And so I send out minion mail a couple times a week, and 90% of it is, here's what I found for you. And 10% of it is, oh, and by the way, here's this other thing. And if you feel like supporting the list, why not buy this book? That would be great. So a tremendous amount is just retention. You build it up through Facebook ads or through referrals, you know, friends going, hey, this guy has a really good set of things that he sends every week, so it'll make sense for you to do it. And then retaining them, which again you do by constantly providing benefit. The kind of the ratio I've heard is you want to do 80% for them and 20% commercial. And I think today you want 95% them and 5% commercial. And that not only gets you people, but it keeps the ones you have, because we've all got mailing lists where we've seen the same email show up for 2 years. And we finally go, you know what? I have never opened a Mattress Select email. I can't even remember why I subscribed to it. I'm out. And you don't want those emailing people or those people on your list. So like, I think of my list, something like 40 or 50% regularly open my emails, which is a really big number. And it's because I'm giving them stuff. And so that's just a really big part, is you're a service. You're not a living commercial. You're helping people.
That's excellent and difficult to replicate for a lot of people, I'm sure. We
Yeah.
talk a lot about introverts and extroverts and how authors trend toward introverts.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, but you were talking about you spend a lot on ads, and you were just talking a minute ago about Facebook. Like, where do you run most of your ads? What is your primary advertising tactic?
I run a lot on Facebook. Let's see. I run some on Twitter. They're not as good, just their data analytics aren't as sharp. I do some Google stuff as well. I did a lot of BookBubs for a long time. Like, I was a really regular BookBub person, which I know is a huge blessing. I got in with them early, and I actually created, again, it was relationships. A lot of the people, when I said I'm quitting writing, they sent me a basket of cookies, you know, and so, and again, it wasn't because like, we've read all your books. It was like, oh, you've been really nice to work with. And so I did that for a long time, but my books are priced so low right now, I'm not going to BookBub them because they're already kind of bottom of the barrel as far as pricing. But BookBub, I spend a lot on, I'm trying to break it down in my head. I actually have spreadsheets for this, but like, I spend stuff on website development. I do a lot of my own website work because I like it, but there comes a point where I'm like, I can't do this. So I have a guy I call. And all of these pieces are marketing. They're part of the funnel. The majority of the money that I spend probably goes, that is, as a single chunk, goes to Facebook. But then there's 1,000 other little chunks that over together, they equal as much as or more than Facebook.
And how do launches factor into your strategy? Like, do you do more advertising around a launch, or is the launch just sort of?
Oh yeah. But again, I have to make it something for them, you know. And so what I have found works for me, and I'm pretty good in interviews, you know, like I do okay on panels, and then after this is over, I'm going to go and be really grouchy and miserable because I am very introverted, and this costs me something. So don't think, oh, I'm not extroverted, I can't do it. It's just like anything else. You have to perform, and then afterwards you cry a little and take your break, you know. And so for me, I have found that if I do a silly video, so for one of my books, Scavenger Hunt, it's a horror novel, and I was getting my kids, my 2 youngest, to bed, and it's this video of me tucking them in and then singing them this bedtime song that is just ridiculous, thrashy song screaming about blood and guts, and they're screaming in their beds, you know, and it was really fun and cute. It's low budget. This is not like Friends or, you know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine stuff. It was just my iPhone and having fun. And so I do these fun videos for launch, and people, and that way they get some fun out of it. And I do a Facebook Live where I take questions, and I have 4 signed copies that I give away, or Kindles or things like that. I do a lot of giveaways, and those are really fun, by the way. Those aren't just, as soon as I looked at it like I'm spending money for a long time. And the kind of switchover came for a lot of this stuff was, but I get to do things for people. And that's really a cool feeling. Would you give $20 to your friend? Of course you would. And that's kind of the headspace I've put myself in, is like, I can afford to buy 5 Kindles and give them away. And that's so cool. I'm going to give away all these Kindles on my next Facebook Live. And I also do contests. So I'm like, whoever does this thing gets a proof copy of the new book. And then people are looked in to see if they won, or to see, there's that whole, like, let's make a deal. Who wants to be a millionaire? Just that game show aspect. But again, the advertisement isn't just buy my book. And on the rare occasions I do say, I need you to buy a book, I explain why. I go, because it's a new book, and if I can get 100 of you to buy it today, my rankings will go up enough that Amazon will be like, aha, and they'll help. And people then, I've been doing nice things for them, and we've created friendships, and they go, oh, well, I'd love to help you. Let me buy a book. And it's a really nice feeling, because then you can give back and forth to each other.
It's a really good point. And oh wait, are you pointing?
I just want to say that was a dope mug, Joseph.
Joe's got it on the camera for those.
That was pretty rad.
He's got a straw.
No, actually, Joe, you need to talk now, because if you don't talk, they won't see it.
I got this at PAX Unplugged from Wild Bill's Sarsaparilla.
It's pretty awesome. Okay, so, and let's see, I read a couple of your books like 7 years ago or whatever, and absolutely love them. And I only read your books selectively, because you know why.
Anytime you ask an author, like, can you read one of my books? You go, look, in my Kindle, the number of electrons have stacked high enough to be a physical danger. And so if you're asking an author to read a book, it's like, sure, I would love to, because I would, but then I am not going to be able to see my family, and I can't. So yeah, and I'm never offended if someone's like, I've never read one of your books. I go, okay, I've never hung out in your backyard. That's cool. We all have our safe zones.
Well, I was actually more leaning towards some of them are too scary for me.
I'm okay with that. The Western romance is pretty terrifying.
Oh yeah, the Western romances are the scariest ones. Just kidding. Anyway, so once I realized that I was going to like your books, a lot of them, I followed you on BookBub. So what I'm going to say now is not as insane. It was very easy for me to count how many BookBubs you'd had in the last 2 years.
Oh,
17. Nice. 17 BookBub features in the last 2 years. So
and it helps that I got 40 books, so like I can rotate them in. Someone else says I didn't get my book up, and you have to wait 30 days to resubmit it, and I can resubmit a book the next day, until the cows come home. So that's very helpful too.
So my question is, what magical unicorn did you have to sacrifice for them to? I mean, you got on early, and I did too, so they accept me regularly, but not like 17 times in the last 2 years. So what kind of advice would you have to give to listeners? I mean, what can they do to help increase BookBub promotions features?
Well, the first one, again, is no matter what, if I provide a cover that sucks, or, if I have a 2.0 rating, they're not going to take it. And I'm not going to have my feelings hurt. Always have your big boy or big girl pants engaged. That is so important. There's a huge number of people who are toddlers masquerading as adults in this industry. And it boggles my mind. I've had so many people say, I can't take a review from you because I don't know you, and I frankly don't want to get yelled at, when I don't review your book as nicely as you want. And so a huge part of the hurdle is saying, I've never yelled at anybody. I mean, Publishers Weekly trashed one of my books, and I wrote the editor a letter and said, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. Please thank your reviewer for taking the time to look at the book. It was a really thoughtful review. And just having that attitude. So when they accept me, I say thank you. If they ask for help, hey, we wanted you to do a survey, I do it. Early on, they revamped their website to make it kind of more friendly to everybody. And they reached out and said, would you be willing to beta test it? And I spent hours on the phone with them just saying, oh, here's something that I noticed. And, here's something that was really good, and here's something I'd love to see. And I think again, it's that courtesy, and it's that being willing to help them. They're in a position where they don't need you. So the best you can do is offer them stuff that will help them. Give them a good product that a lot of people are going to buy. Talk about them nice. BookBub is great, and I will always say that. And the people are super nice. So if you reach out and say thank you, they almost always respond. So it's, again, a lot of it's just being the kind of person that other people like to work with. I mean, at a certain point, you get to this level of professionalism, hopefully, that you're here. And there's another person, there's a million other people that are also at that same level. And so ultimately it comes down to the person's going to look between them. Do I want this book or this book? Do I want to work with this thing or this thing? And they're going to say, they're equal skill, but I like this person. And that's the person they're going to go with. And there's nothing wrong with that. So you do want to present yourself as kind and willing to work with people, and it makes you a better writer. I really think if you can develop an appreciation for other people, you notice all their cool stories, and that's all stuff you can steal.
Assuming we're being cool and professional and polite, I've noticed with BookBub it's a lot easier for me to get ads on wide books, and I've heard from the same from other authors.
Oh yeah.
Have you found that? Do you usually submit your wide books and have better luck with that?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. That's another reason I have some that are wide. I think about half of them are wide, and again, that gives me, in the event I start cycling through BookBub again, because right now I don't give my books away for free through BookBub. I just haven't found that to be useful. Some people have great success with it, but I don't have a lot of series. Most of my books are standalone, and so I'm not going to go with them. But when I do, when the prices go back up after all this craziness happens, I will definitely have 20 books. And maybe they don't like me. Maybe they just get sick of receiving an email every 2 days, like, what about this book? What about this book? What about this book? They're like, just take the next one because this is ridiculous, you know? So it really does help to have those wide, definitely. They are not interested in Amazon only. And it makes sense because they get paid less overall. They get less. They're providing a service. And if everybody that opens their email says, I can only have Amazon, but I like Kobo, but I like Apple iBooks or whatever it is, then their service level goes down and they're not interested in that.
You mentioned that everything is 99 cents right now, and I think on all the book pages it says, this is my COVID, thank you, you know. Are you still advertising as much? Are you able to make it work with the books at 99 cents?
It's funny because I expected to do it for like 2 or 3 days, because that, for those of you out there who don't know, if you sell your book at $2.99, you get 70% of that from Amazon. If you sell your book at 99 cents, you get 30%. So if I cut it from $2.99 to $1, I'm not taking a 60% pay cut. I'm taking like a 90% pay cut. And so my wife and I talked about it, and we said, this is the right thing to do. Everyone's having a hard time. Let's just do it, and we'll keep it up as long as we can and take the hit. And all of my fans went nuts over it and started spreading the word. And so it's in its like 5th or 6th week, I think, because I've been able to make up in bulk what I'm missing out in those, per unit royalties. And we're going to keep that going as long as we can. And the advertising, honestly, I just made a post on my fan page that said, here's what I'm doing. And I just boost the heck out of that. And that's got something like 4,000 likes on it or something ridiculous at this point. And I didn't spend $1 million for that. But again, people, they're like, that's so kind. And I get emails every day from people who haven't even read my books. They just want to say, thanks, that was really cool.
Awesome. I'm been curious from the beginning. I'm a bit of a genre jumper myself, a little sci-fi, a little fantasy. I haven't done Western romance yet. I've done sci-fi romance.
Nice.
I'm curious, have you tried a pen name, or have you just decided to do it all under your own name, and why or why not?
All of the stuff except Western romance says Michaelbrent Collings on the cover. The Western romance, I do a bit of a split thing with. The cover says Angelica Hart, and that's mostly because I think there's a very big stigma against male authors in romance. And that's just as unfair as there being a stigma against female authors in thriller and mystery and things like that, which is just nonsense. I think it's ridiculous. But so I have her name there, but I out myself in the about the author. And if they sign up for the email, it, the mailing list, it comes from Michaelbrent. And if you are looking for Angelica, you're in the right place, because it's me. I'm sorry I have dude parts. The reason that I started with it again was the stigma. The reason I stopped doing it, because it was a totally separate identity, but I was having these like 40-year-old divorced women emailing me as their like girl pal and talking about all the men crap in their life, which I'm happy to listen to. One of the people who knew I was both, I said, "Thanks, Oodles." And she said, "Look, I know this is really a guy. You don't have to write like that." And I said, "I write like that all the time. That's just like I express myself that way." And so I don't change myself, but it was still, I felt really bad for these women who needed to vent to another female, which is important, and thought they were. And I didn't want to be crucified. Like somebody comes with a boiled rabbit that they throw on my lawn and they're like, "I thought you were a woman," so I gave it up. I thought it was creepy and sad. Like I didn't want to be lying to these people who needed that in their lives.
Yeah, I know a lot of women who write under like initials or male names for sci-fi, and I was wondering, like, what kind of emails do they get from their dude bros?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And hats off, and some people it works for them. It was just me personally, and I'm not saying if you have a pen name in an opposite sex you should feel like you're lying to people. That was just me. I don't know, it just felt weird for Michaelbrent, and it could feel fine for somebody else, and they can be like, "I'll be your gal pal." And be fine with it. And I'm not judging. I was just saying, like, it didn't work for me. So it's all kind of grouped under Michaelbrent branding, and my website only has Michaelbrent, but there's a section that says Romance by Angelica Hart. So you can go to the same place for all of it.
Right. We're not trying to shame anybody if they are
No,
doing that. Like you
not
said,
at all.
Guys often want male authors, like in sci-fi and probably thrillers too, and then women expect women
I'm not going to
in
judge.
romance.
I wish everybody could write whatever, like I've never ever picked up a thriller and been like, "Mad chick wrote this." The last time I did that was when I was a kid, and I found out that Hardy Boys wasn't written by a man, it was written by a woman. And I'm 7, and I was kind of devastated by that. And my dad goes, "Why? You like the stories?" And I went, "Oh." And that was the last time I thought about the gender as being a defining quality of the author's writing.
Yeah, it's a little bit silly. It's funny because when I was a little kid, it completely went over my head that anybody wrote these. I thought books were just magical things that showed up. Like, and it's bitten me in the butt, because now I can't remember who wrote my favorite books when I was little, because I never took note of the author. I was just like, I could have been reading so many more books by the same people.
Just the Choose Your Own Adventure fairy showed up and dropped it off.
Exactly. All right. So in the modern world of indie publishing, it feels like you've got to be churning out books to be successful. And obviously that's not universally the case, but in general, high productivity is going to be more profitable than low productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had problems with burnout trying to keep up?
No, I've never had writer's block, and that's partly because I define it in a way that I think is more healthy and functional. I think a lot of people think of typing as being writing. And so if I'm not typing today, I must not be successful as a writer. And that's just nonsense. Because there's this whole gamut of things that you do that go into writing. And so when I'm actually typing, I'm also thinking about another book, or I'm thinking about a cover I'm working on. And there's all of these cyclical things that are happening at the same time. But if I'm not typing, if I go watch a movie, I'm still writing, because I'm watching it and going, "Oh, how did they do that scene? That was really good dialogue. How can I do something similar?" And so it allows me to be a little more flexible day to day, and feeling good about my output. And then similarly, if I get to a point in a story where I'm like, "I don't know what happens now," who cares? That's part of the process. When I was a lawyer, there was a lot of times where I sat and just kind of stared at my screen going, "How am I going to make this argument?" And you better believe that staring at that screen, I billed my clients for that time, because I was lawyering. I wasn't like playing Minesweeper or solitaire. I'm thinking about the job and how to accomplish it. So if you sit there and you paint yourself into a corner, the 2 tricks I have to get out of it every time are, number 1, thinking about it is okay. And number 2, I just, you know, if I've got my hero in an impossible situation, I go, well, what would he need to get out of it? What would she need? A helicopter. And a helicopter shows up and it's Deus Ex Machina, and that doesn't work. So I'm like, now I need to layer in the helicopter in the story. And that's fine. So you just blow up. You don't have to be beholden to the structure of what you've already done. Blow it up in reverse and stick in the thing that you need. And that's fine. So I don't have any trouble with burnout. In fact, I used to write 6 to 8 titles a year, and I slowed it down. And these are full books. They weren't like pamphlets. And I slowed it down because I don't think my fan base appreciated it. There's so many people that aren't interested in reading a book a month. So that's never been a problem, and I'm very grateful for it. But I think fewer people would have a problem with it if they just kind of allowed themselves that time to think and allowed themselves to say, I'm going to go to a movie as my writing today.
That's a really good point. And my favorite is when I do write myself into a corner, because that forces me to think of a unique or interesting way out.
Yeah,
and readers love that, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's where you surprise them, you know? Like, oh, I didn't expect that.
That's such a cool thing that we have, because writers or readers come up and go, you're so smart, I never would have thought of the way, because they read it in a 2-hour block and they think, that's brilliant, I never could have thought of that. And I go, I know, because I'm really smart. But I don't point out that I thought about it for 6 months. And so I'm glad I was able to outsmart them for 2 hours using 6 months of prep time. I just don't point that out to them. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to just blow the socks off a reader. In fact, that's one of the best. Okay, I'll TMI it a little bit. So I write at all sorts of random places, or I did before the shutdown stuff happened. And so I'm sitting in my thinking place at the grocery store, because they have a deli, and I'm writing off in the corner, and my thinking place in this instance was the bathroom. And I just start giggling in the stall, and there's somebody next to me. Okay, so like I'm not all alone in the bathroom, but the idea came and I was just laughing, and I looked down and there's like feet, and they kind of went, and they, like, the person's still on the toilet but wants to distance themselves a little bit.
They shifted their feet away.
Oh my gosh, it was so funny. And of course that made it worse because I started laughing harder, right?
What you should have done is reach under and grab their ankle.
Yeah, right. Be like, guess what just happened to me? But it was great because, you know, it sounds silly, but if I hadn't gotten up and said, I'm stuck, I'm going to go to the bathroom, now's a good time. And if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't have had that idea. So allowing myself to get up, to leave the page and just think for a while. And it was such a good moment. And I went, oh, that's perfect. And it was a moment that fans wrote and said, I never saw that coming.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those little moments are super exciting, you know, as an author. Okay, so we're going to transition to screenwriting because it's fun and it's interesting. Okay, so was it like a year ago or something like that? Nolan, my husband, and I made you come and do an episode with us on our podcast.
You made me do it. Like there was a gun and a creepy guy named Joe who was just standing behind me like, you better do this.
Yes, or it might have just been a creepy guy named Nolan.
Okay, yeah, well, that's fair.
He's not creepy.
No, he's awesome.
He is great. Anyway, so what we do with our podcast is kind of on hiatus right now because I'm only able to do one show a week right now, just my life. Anyway, we watch a movie and we talk about it with authors or just me and my husband. And for the episode that we did with Michaelbrent, we watched his movie and talked about it with him. So if you want to hear, that was fantastic episode, super awesome. You've got to go and listen to it. So we're not going to rehash the whole thing because it would take us another hour and a half. Okay, so you've had at least 2 screenplays get produced, and we'll put a link to in the show notes, I guess, to the one where we talked about your movie. But what are the stories behind how those came about?
I don't know. I mean, it's the same as a book. I like writing them. I read my first screenplay when I was in high school. Just a guy brought the screenplay for Terminator 2, and it was like they sell screenplays to people who are so into the movie they want this product as well. So it was bound like a book, and he handed it around, and a lot of people went, huh? And I read 2 pages, and I was like, oh my gosh, this blows me away that this happens. Because just like Joe, I kind of thought movies just appeared, you know, like you go to the Cineplex and you pay the money and that's when they appear. They don't have existence until you've paid your money and walked in. And this was kind of my first glimpse into the process. And I loved the way it was written, just so sparely. It's almost poetic at times because they're working with such limited space, and seeing the dialogue so upfront and important and blocked out so that you could see everything. Bless you. It
Thank
was,
you.
Andrea sneezed. It was just really cool. And so I started doing that just as a fun thing. And it grew as I started writing books more seriously. And so I would write and write. And then my kind of foot in the door moment was, there's this really, it's probably the biggest, like most, I don't want to say successful, but kind of the most well-regarded screenplay contest in the world. And I put 4 scripts in, and they all made it to semi and quarterfinals. And so people started calling me from Hollywood going, I loved it. It was so funny. People are so schmoozy sometimes, like, hey, I saw your screenplay. It looks really great. I'm so excited you got to the quarter to semifinals. And I would go, or, I'm so excited you got so high in the nickel. And I'd say, oh yeah, which screenplay was it? Dead silence every time, because they didn't know. They just got a list of people who were quarterfinalists or whatever, and they just called them all. But I landed a manager for screenwriting, and now all my books, as I'm writing them, either immediately before or immediately after, I write it as a screenplay as well, because it's just a monetization thing that I can use this property and maybe make some more money. And it's very handy now, because because I have achieved a certain level of success, that I can write an email to a producer and say, here's me, and I have this many social media people and this many mailing list, and you better believe that matters, because they're like, oh, that's 20, 30, whatever thousand who will show up at the theater. And that's something a lot of writers can't bring. And so that piques their interest. And then I can say, and the book was, a year as a suspense horror bestseller on Amazon. And all that stuff feeds into their metric, because they're looking to make money as well. And so again, it's about offering them something helpful and useful and giving them information they can work with. And I've already got the product there. And then I can say, and I'm an indie, so you don't have to futz around with buying the book rights and then getting a screenplay. I'll just give it to you both at the same time.
Very cool. I was actually early in my workshop career, writing career, learning the ropes of writing fiction. I got a book of like 4 episodes of Frasier sitcom. This was like early 2000 or so.
One of the best ever.
And I was like ready to turn right there. I was like, oh my God, all you have to write is the dialogue. This is what I love. This is great. Then I looked into like all the networking and schmoozing and stuff that kind of was implied, that you have to like go to Hollywood and really get into that industry. I was like, nah, I'm gonna go back to writing books.
Yeah.
Is that true, or what do you think?
Well, it's like anything else. I mean, if you're around the people in the business, then you're going to have access to those people more. One of my screenplays I wrote and sold face-to-face meetings. Like I gave them the script and we talked. One of them was totally over the internet. I mean, like I never met them. I spoke to them. The first time I talked to them was when the movie was in production and they had a problem, and they called the writer for, like an overnight rewrite kind of thing. And so it's possible to do this stuff without being in that area. I live in Idaho, and I send out, I don't know, dozens of screenplays a month to producers who are interested. And I reach out to them, and very few of them, I don't think anyone ever has said as the first email, well, where do you live? Like they want to see the product. And then if they do want to meet, because that is a thing, they go, hey, let me take you to coffee, or I'll take you to dinner or lunch, or the do lunch thing is real. Although it's much more often, let's do coffee together. And I'll say, well, I would love to, but the commute's a bit far for a Starbucks run for me. And so we'll talk on the phone. I had a lovely conversation with a producer who's got tens of millions of dollars of money in an equity account, investors looking for the next movie. And we talked for like an hour and a half, just like, we got along, because I called up first thing I said was, were you one of the producers? Because I wanted to be sure, of Ratchet and Clank, the movie. And he kind of went, yeah. And I went, that was an awesome movie. And again, he's like, well, let's talk some more about that then, because people like to be appreciated. But I loved that movie. It was so fun. So I wasn't lying. And all that to say, you can do it, but it's like anything else. It's harder if you're away from the people who have the influence, who have the money, who make the decisions. And it is harder to come across as their friend, or somebody who's going to be immediately assisting them if you're not next door. If they call me and say, hey, let's meet for a coffee run, and we've got this big script problem, I can't do that because I am a state away. But I can also say, hey, if you're producing this movie, I'll fly out, and spend whatever days you want there and be available. And that's very helpful too. So you can make yourself available enough, but the numbers are going to not be as much in your favor. And in screenwriting, they are already tremendously against you. And that's simply because, like, if I hand a book to somebody and they hand me $3, $5, $10, that's great. If I hand a screenplay to somebody, the next requirement is they give me enough money to buy a house. I mean, the investment up front is so tremendous that it's very hard to get to that point with anybody.
All right, thank you for answering my curiosity there. I think the answer is yes, networking would be a good thing to plan to do.
I'm a writer and I used to be a lawyer, so I get verbal diarrhea at the drop of a hat.
No, it's great. You're a great speaker. We appreciate you answering our questions. And we're almost done. I just have one more for you here. For those authors who do really want to see their book as a movie, is it better to just try to find an agent or pitch people, or should they take the time to learn how to write screenplays? Is that a way to get in a back door or anything easier?
Okay, so yes, first of all, if you're going to write a screenplay, what I tell people is it's a totally different language. It's like Portuguese and Spanish. I speak Spanish. The first time I heard Portuguese, I thought I'd had a stroke. I mean, it sounded sort of similar, but I couldn't understand it. And books and screenplays, they use words, they use story structure, but they're different languages. So if you want to write a screenplay, you have to be a professional. It is hard. I was a reader for Fox, for a production company at Fox Studios. Sorry, they all kind of bleed together. And I did it for like a year. And in that year, I said, this is good enough for the next level of reader to 2 screenplays. So the bar is tremendously high. It is very hard. And if you're not expert and professional and perfect at it, you're just not going to make it. If your alternative is, I want my book to be made into a movie, there is one way to make that happen. And that's to sell millions of copies or hundreds of thousands of copies or whatever it is, and get the attention of a producer who will reach out to you. It does help to have, you want a good cover, but this is definitely an area where having like a really slamming description on your Amazon page is more helpful. They are extremely busy people, producers and people in Hollywood. They're so busy, so much. I mean, writers who are working, we're really busy, not even the same level. They're so busy. And so I got called by someone in Joel Silver's production company. They did like The Matrix and stuff like that. They're a big company. And he said, is this book available? And I said, yes. Did you like it? Because that low self-esteem, did you like it? And he goes, oh, I don't know. But that first line of the description was rad, And so the whole thing was, the tagline of the book was what had interested him. And that's not unusual because, again, they're looking at it like, can I see the movie poster? And they want to know that. But if you go to them and say, hey, it sold 50 million copies, they're going to make a crappy movie out of a crappy book like 50 Shades of Grey. Because again, they're going to be interested in those butts and those seats. So if you want your book made into a movie, sell a lot of books.
Yeah, it's funny because like, we're indie authors, and indie authors are accustomed to relatively few obstacles between us and our audience. Like, usually it's no one. Like,
yeah.
we get straight to the distributor and that's it. But it seems like screenwriting is 98% obstacles. I read a book on screenwriting a while ago, and the pipeline was get an agent / manager / lawyer, probably all 3, and then they have to pitch to a production company, and then the production company pitches it to a studio.
Yeah.
And like, is that still the way of things? Like, again, we talk about how indie books move incredibly quickly. It seems like Hollywood hasn't moved at all.
Oh, yeah, and it makes sense because, again, they're putting so much money into it, and people go, well, why do they make such crappy movies? And what I tell them is, when you watch the credits, you see 1,000 names, and every single one of those people has the total power to ruin the movie. And I mean, like, I used to be a producer for print ad photo shoots for a while, and again, that was somebody, I was out of work and somebody was like, hey, I do photo shoots, you can be the producer, because he liked me, you know. But somebody brought the wrong gummy bears and it turned into this big, huge to-do, you know. And it's definitely like that with movies. There's a lot of money that goes into it. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of work. Can we make this money that we're going to invest back? And it's highly, highly collaborative. And one thing to be aware of is I tell everyone this, if you go to a Hollywood meeting, like they're like, we want to meet you. And you walk in and they say, I'm a big fan. That's Hollywood code for, I don't know you. I liked this thing. You're not getting any money today. Like, I've never had somebody say, I'm a huge fan, we want to buy this. You know, they want to meet you and find out what kind of person you are. And Barricade, the one that Andrea talked about, that sat on an executive's desk for like 5 years. But I stayed in contact and I was kind and I looked for his name in the trades. I was like, hey, I saw you in Variety. That's awesome. And so I stayed in the top level of his consciousness. But even then, he couldn't do anything with it until he got promoted, until he had the right executive producer who walked in and said, we want a ghost story. And until the parent company had changed the whole way they were making movies to accommodate this kind of film. So yeah, it is, you are just going to have to roll the dice and roll the dice and roll the dice. And the good news is you can do that forever. You know, I tell people writing, whether it's screenwriting, book writing, whatever, you're betting with house money. You can bet forever. You can roll the dice forever. The only problem is you roll, you lose, you look at the guy next to you and you go, can I have some more money? And you go, sure, and punches you in the crotch as hard as he can, and then gives you the money. And so you have to be able to take that pain with every single roll. And for some people, again, they're like, you know, being punched in the crotch is less fun than I thought it would be originally. And so I'm going to be a doctor. And that's fine. That's a business decision. That's a mental health decision. And that's a laudable decision. So if any of your listeners are like, I don't feel like I'm making it and I'm miserable, cool, do something else. Be happy.
I 100% agree with that. A lot of authors, I mean, they push themselves so hard to the point where they aren't having fun anymore,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, this is our passion. This is something that we should be excited about, even if, you know, it goes up and down, there's a roller coaster ride, but you should overall be enjoying it, you know?
Yeah. 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 Why do this I mean, if you can be anything, I'm like, if you can be a doctor, a trash hauler, a crack whore, any of these things, they have better dental coverage, if nothing else. I mean,
Crack horse?
oh, I would guarantee you they've probably got something that's better, because they got, you know, they got to be pretty for the crack dealers and stuff. But I know a lot about it. You know, I used to be one because of this face.
Oh, yes, the face.
No, but if you're happy you're doing something else, then do something else. What I tell people is, who has, you know, when I talk to big groups, who wants to be a writer? Everybody's hand goes up. Who has a job that they like and are content with and gives them time to write on the side? And a lot of hands go up, and I'm like, then stay with that. You've already won. Because if you become a professional writer, you turn in all of your security. The only job security a writer has is their last royalty payment. And so you're giving up all your security, and you're turning what you love to do and can do whenever you want into something that you'll still love 5% of the time, and are going to not want to do more days than most, but you have to, because it's your job. And it is an enjoyable job, but it's still a job, you know. And when I was hobbying, if I was writing, it was because it was flowing and I wanted to do it. And now it's because, you know, it's Monday between the ages, or the times of 6 a.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. And so those are all job hours.
Yes. I love how you go into like hippie mode.
It's all about it, man.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Do you have any final thoughts you want to give to our listeners? Any parting advice, words of anything?
Again, I'm a really big proponent of being nice. You know, you can fail at anything, and it's about the people who won't let you fail and the people who love you, and will put up with your crazy days and your bad days, and the days where you're not succeeding at the level you want to. So be kind, reach out, make friends, and you don't have to be extroverted to do that. The thing you have to do to be friendly and kind is to be appreciative of others' good qualities. If you can't see one, look for it, and then look for ways to help them. And people respond to that. Right. Learn your craft, but your craft is only going to take you so far. I guarantee you the best writer in the world hasn't been discovered. It's somebody who's out there writing things that no one's seen. Just statistically, that's the chance. And so your best bet is to learn as well as you can, and then make everybody around you know that you appreciate them being part of your life.
Yeah, I like that. That was one thing that every single panel we've ever been on, you always pointed out, just being nice and keeping in contact with people that, you actually get along with and you like, Anyway, awesome. Okay, so where can people find you and where do you want them to go?
My website is writteninsomnia.com, Written Insomnia, stories that keep you up all night. The easiest way to find me is just Google Michaelbrent. It's all one word. And if you Google it, I'm the only one in the world. That's the nice thing. So you'll find my Amazon page, my website, my fan page, all that good stuff. I'm super easy to find, and just grab a book. And like I said, you can buy all my books for like $50 and you've got 2 months of reading, which is pretty cool.
Unless you're one of those rabid romance readers, then you've probably got like 2 weeks of reading.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, there's only 5 of them are romance. So that's fine. That's a fair point, though.
That's my mom. She reads like 2 novels a day.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Yes, it is. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been good talking to you.
I always appreciate hanging out with you, Andrea, and it was a pleasure meeting Joe and Lindsay. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for letting me play with you for a bit.
That didn't sound at all creepy, did it?
No.
He grabbed us under the stall door when you guys weren't looking.
Thank you for letting me play with you.
These horror writers, man, they're a special sort.
I've mapped all your IP addresses and I know where you live.
You're like in the state next to mine. I should be a little concerned, maybe.
Well, I was lying about the Idaho thing, by the way.